Well, welcome. It is the season for elections. This is going to be a hard one to start because when I say please introduce yourself, I don't know if there's anybody in Milford who doesn't know our guest tonight, but let's start with an introduction.
Al, thank you for having me on the show. I'm Brian Murray, as you know, and finishing up my first term as a state representative, and obviously have my name on the ballot seeking another term.
Brian, I always start out, as you know, because you've been here many times before, with the same question that I end up with. I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
I think, with any candidacy, voters have to evaluate, the job that the person has been doing when the person is an incumbent. And if you look back when I first got elected 2 years ago, one of the prime focuses that I said that I would make as a commitment during my term was constituent service, because I realized how important it is for local residents to feel comfortable with their representative at the state level to try to deal with some of these issues at the state level, whether it's mass health or the registry of motor vehicles or whatever agency it is, to have that representative really assist them and deal with a lot of those issues. And I was certainly able to do that, I believe. We assisted in over 750 constituent requests, concerns, and issues. Most of them, I'd like to think we were successful on. There were some that we weren't able to satisfy the person fully, but that's being attentive to the constituents' needs. And that was the prime focus that we had throughout my first term. I'd also like to think that even as a freshman legislature, which is problematic in its own, I had some success in bringing home some projects, not only to Milford, but also to Mendon, Hopedale, and Medway as well. And I also had the opportunity to participate in some major far-reaching legislation as a freshman. So, I mean, it's been a learning experience for me. I think that my experience as a selectman and a school committee member certainly helped a lot. Despite that, there were scenarios and situations that were new to me, and I had to learn. In fact, many of the constituents that called, I would tell them, look, I don't know the answer to this, but I want to learn, and if you'll be patient with me, we can learn together. And we had a lot of success with that. So, I think I've, done what I said I was going to do, and I'm asking the voters for another opportunity to build on that foundation and deliver even more next term.
Now, we talk about freshmen. When you started, when John started, when Marie started, you always worry that you're taking a position that's been there for 10 years, building up all the goodwill and all, and you're putting in somebody brand new. So, is it safe to say that you've endured the hard years of being a freshman and now it'll get easier?
Well, I don't know if it gets easier, it gets more familiar. There are always challenges to it, and of course, being a freshman, part of it is trying to learn the procedures, learn the protocols, learn how the body works. In addition to that, you've got to build relationships with other legislators, folks that work in state government, because it's like anything. I mean, if you can build a relationship with someone, that's part of the battle towards solving the problem. I think I worked well, certainly, with my colleagues in the House, both Democrat and Republican. I believe that I worked very well with the two senators I'm affiliated with, Ryan Fatman, who represents Milford, Mendon, and Hopedale, and also Karen Spilka, who I share Precinct 1 in Medway with. I've had great relationships with both of their offices. I think that's led to some of the successes that we had district-wide. But yes, it certainly is helpful having gone through the cycle, starting those relationships, building upon the experience that I have, and certainly if I can hopefully get reelected for a second term, you kind of look at things a little bit differently, you have a little bit different footing, and you kind of know where to go just a little bit better.
Well, I'm just thinking, you start off in the bullpen with a bunch of other freshmen,
It is the bullpen, yes.
and you develop those relationships, and I was worried, like everybody was, okay, you're taking somebody from a 10-year tenure, and all of a sudden you're putting in, it wasn't you, it was anybody, brand new. So there's got to be an advantage to renewal for Milford and the rest of the towns you represent, just for the fact that you now have relationships and you don't have to spend a lot of time building them.
Absolutely, and I was fortunate enough to be asked to serve as a co-chair of the Library Legislative Caucus for the House, myself and Representative Natalie Higgins, who also is a freshman from Leominster. So that was a request from the leadership. I don't know why they did it, but I think that we use that opportunity to get some real benefits for the library. There are about 7 or 8 major line items for the state libraries throughout the Commonwealth, and we were able to achieve significant financial increase in at least 6 of those line items. We've met with library directors across the state, and just that experience alone has been very, very helpful, not only in helping libraries, which obviously filters down to our districts, but also just really getting a sense as to how to build upon an issue and have success for the greater good.
Now, one of the things you talk about working with your colleagues, you're probably one of the few who has a colleague from a different party. There's 6 Republican senators. So you get the unique opportunity to have to work with a different party. But it doesn't seem, we read in Washington, everything is black or white. It doesn't seem that way with you and Ryan.
No, it is not with us. And, I think, and you'll relate to this because, we've worked together on town issues. Coming from a school committee background, coming from a selectman background, we don't think about parties. We think about getting done what needs to get done. And that's the same attitude that I've carried into the House. And I've worked very closely with Democrats, I've worked very closely with Republicans, and I worked very closely with Senator Fatman's office and Senator Spilka's office on pieces of legislation or constituent matters. I worked very closely with the governor's office on a bill about stormwater, which in Milford has been a huge issue. And the bill that the governor filed sought to take the jurisdiction on the stormwater issue from the federal EPA and bring it to the state Department of DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. Well, I was able to draw on my experience as a selectman, having firsthand experience with both of those agencies. EPA with stormwater, which has been very frustrating in Milford, and DEP when we had the water crisis in 2009. And I was able to put together some extensive testimony on behalf of that bill for the governor's office to the Natural Resources Committee. Now, unfortunately, that didn't pass, but the effort was there. It was not a partisan issue in terms of, well, it's a Republican governor, we can't support that at all. The bill makes sense. It ought to pass, and hopefully, I can be there next session to try to take another crack at it.
That always amazes me because, like you say, you should be voting on the bill. People who are far left scare me no more, no less than people who are far right. Anybody who spouts dogma, all of a sudden, I feel bad that, wait a second, are you looking at the issues? And like you say, locally, I don't know that everybody knows whether you're Democrat, Republican, or unenrolled.
It doesn't matter. You've got a job to do, and you've got to do it. So you've got to work with the folks who are involved with it. And that's the same attitude that I've taken in the House. Again, I've worked very closely with Republicans, very closely with Democrats. To me, it doesn't matter. If the issue makes sense, we go forward and support it.
But now, every term is 2 years.
Yes.
Does that seem a little short?
It sure does. Obviously institutionally it is what it is, But, I can tell you from firsthand experience, it definitely makes it more difficult to try to get things done, because you really have like a full year of legislative work. But you've got to understand, there are over 7,000 bills that we faced at the beginning of the session. All of them have committee hearings. Frequently on bills, you might think on a bill, well, there's one group that's in favor of it, or a couple of groups that are. There could be a number of different groups that are interested in a bill at any given level. So all of those stakeholders need to have their say, need to have their input. And it's like a lot of cooks trying to cook the stew. It gets very difficult to try to...
Everybody's throwing a little bit of spice in that...
It gets very difficult to try to boil it down to a particular issue.
now-
And that year goes by very quickly.
You come in as a freshman. You take a year to basically learn where the men's room is. I mean, I hate to say it, but just to learn how to do things, who gets things done. And then you got this year that we'll talk about some of the fruits of your labor. I mean, it seems kind of hard to be changing horses.
Well, I learned where the men's room was quicker than a year, but and things happen in stages. So, for example, you're sworn in the beginning of January. You have 2 weeks to file your bills. So you've got to figure out what bills you're going to file. I think it was January 13th was the deadline, something like that. So you've got a couple of weeks to get your bills in there. Then budget always comes up in April. Then committee hearings. So I was on 4 committees. So you have committee hearings on various bills. So it's how can I describe it? It's a progressive process, but as steps come and steps go, you need to really learn what to deal with and how to do it, and do it quickly to meet that
But
deadline.
isn't it safe to say that you know it's coming now, and you know what's coming for this next term?
Oh, yes.
So I would hope that you've already got a leg up on, okay, this is what I'm planning on doing, not, okay, Brian, here's January 1st, you got 2 weeks, go.
Right, yeah. No, having gone through the cycle is very, very helpful, and laying the foundation that I did this first term is very, very helpful. And like I said, hopefully I'll be able to build on that foundation and achieve, some greater success.
Now, as we look at the committees you're on, tell us about it.
Probably the most time intensive was the Revenue Committee. I think that had the most bills. That deals with taxation, any type of revenue issue, exemptions, anything like that. There were a number of hearings on that. And we got through all of those bills. And then we had, I think it was about a 7-hour hearing after the administration passed the new tax bill, the new federal tax bill. And I'm trying to remember what the date was on that. I believe it was sometime in January of this year. So we heard from experts all across the state in terms of how that new federal tax bill can impact folks. The committee that I probably...
But wait a minute, revenue experts. It seems very simple. The coasts were blue. We're going to get you.
Yeah, that's
I hate to be cold about it, but
yeah.
$10,000 doesn't cover too much of real estate in Massachusetts.
Right.
I mean, if you're out in the square states, I'm sure that a house in any of the square states probably isn't paying anywhere near the taxes, and we're lucky we're in Milford.
Right.
If we're in Holliston or some of the other towns.
I mean, it was broken down to us that folks in the income range, I think between $300,000 and $800,000 or $300,000 and $600,000 per year achieve the greatest savings under this tax bill. It was broken down to us that there could be potentials to try to expand or alleviate that state and local tax deduction that you talked about, the $10,000. So there were various avenues that were presented to us. Now the IRS, I don't know if you've been following, they've been cutting back on some of these potentialities to try to hold to that $10,000. You're not going to be able to get around it by setting up a charitable entity and,
Or deducting the charity as if it was payment in lieu of taxes.
Exactly, and these were all things that were presented, because this was early on. The bill had just passed, there was a lot of uncertainty. There were, economists, there were, I'm trying to remember, university officials, professors, that type of thing. But I mean, I think the point is really that I think that the Massachusetts legislature was out in front on that early on to see what, if anything, could be done to try to soften that federal tax blow.
But when you start talking $600,000 to $800,000 income, don't know a lot of people in the Heights.
No.
who are going to be worried about going over the 6 to 8 or
Right.
4 to 800,000.
And that's the group that achieves the greatest benefit under that tax bill.
So now I've heard other tax ideas of, taxing the more mass pike, putting taxes. What's going on there?
Well, there's no taxes there's no broad-based taxes that came out of the legislative session, this year at all. There was, one bill that came forward on the short-term rentals to try to equalize that with the hotels, but the governor did not sign that, and it got sent back after the formal session closed with a couple of amendments, and I think that's still where it sits. But there were no broad-based taxes that came out of this legislative session at all. In fact, revenue forecasts were much higher in fiscal year 18 than anticipated. So we ended the year with a surplus, I think, of about $1.2 billion out of a $40+ billion budget.
Now, will they do like Milford and give some of it back?
Well, that's a good question, and that too is still being, I guess, debated. The governor put forth a proposal. A significant amount is going to, I guess, pay some unpaid bills. A significant amount the governor is proposing to put forth for schools, safety, that type of thing. A significant amount is proposed to put into what you would call the stabilization fund. People refer to it as the rainy day fund, that type of thing. But the legislature hasn't, either the House or the Senate, as far as I know, have not acted on that. So that's still a question.
I just worry when I hear about these broad-based taxes, on cars and all, because it all seems like East and West pays for North and South.
Yeah.
Remember when Governor Patrick came out and he was stumping for his $2 billion.
Yeah.
And I had to ask him, will any of that money go across 128? Because it seems like we're paying for most of these programs.
Sure.
But can you, as a small town legislator, can you fight the big cities, the Bostons, the Worcesters, the Springfield?
Well, the way to do it, first of all, in addition, to building relationships, the way to do it is to form coalitions. So Milford is in a very, this 10th Worcester district is a very interesting district in the sense that we're not part of Metro West, but we are. We're not fully in the Blackstone Valley, but we are. We're not really central Massachusetts, Worcester, but we are. So you really have a foot in three different coalitions, because each one of those groups are sets of legislators with their own concerns and issues and that type of thing. So one of the things that I did try to do was build relationships with all three groups, because there are strength in numbers. And that's how you can try to put forth and affect change.
So do you see in the transportation, you see anything big coming our way?
Well, the governor has appointed a commission to review the future of transportation. I think that's going to, depending on when that report comes out, I think it's supposed to come out next year. I'm not totally certain. I think that's probably going to be the blueprint going forward to see where the transportation infrastructure is going to go. I think everybody agrees that the T needs some serious improvement. Obviously there's funding needed for transportation repairs and structure. The problem is nobody knows where to draw that funding from. But there is a commission in place, and I've got to think that that's going to lay the blueprint going forward on try to
I just
address
get
it.
worried that, again, the West, Metro West will pay. Because everybody knows the T has to be improved. Okay, who's going to pay for that? And that's my only concern.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's necessarily, paying. I mean, me personally, and I'm not on the transportation committee or anything, but I see Keolis as a big problem. I see a huge investment into this privatization, this firm that offers nothing but, management oversight. So I don't know that expense is necessary. But I mean, I think those are the kinds of issues that are going to be looked at going forward.
Second committee.
Probably the committee that I had most fun on was the municipalities and regional government.
Well, you had a little experience to draw.
Yeah, that was that.
How many decades here?
Right, yeah. That was one that certainly I think I could relate to the most. The issues came clearly to me. I was able to, I think, provide some meaningful feedback at some of the hearings. And probably the major bill that came out of that was the smart growth, the housing, the land use bill, which was a mega bill. That was a day, 5 to 6 hours of hearing. And the problem with that bill is it's just so huge, so encompassing. It's trying to make zoning easier. It's trying to provide for open space. It's trying to allow communities to have mixed-use developments. It's trying to do a lot of different things. So I was asked by the chair of that committee to work on a subcommittee to try to willow that down. And we were able to do that as a committee. The bill went forward. Now I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure it got through the House, and it didn't go any farther than that. So I think that bill is still kind of pending there. What we passed at the House was a smaller version, and it just didn't make it through the final legislative session. So that's something that I think next legislative session, it takes a few sessions for these ideas to firm up and become bills and eventual laws. It's kind of like a percolation process.
Isn't that tough if every 2 years you're changing somebody?
It is. So you've got to rely upon the nucleus of the body that's there, and then new folks, can certainly, build on it. But the leadership, I think tries to maintain, a certain focus on issues. And lots of these issues take more than one session to pass. The criminal justice bill that we passed, which Representative Fernandez was hugely involved in, did not pass during his tenure, even though he did a tremendous amount of work on it, but it passed during this tenure. So a lot of these ideas do take 1, 2, maybe 3, even 4 sessions to ultimately become law. And I think that this housing bill is going to be the same type of thing. There's a huge need for it. The zoning law really hasn't been touched since 1969. So, that's something that needs to be dealt with. Your smart growth, your mixed-use development is what communities are doing. Just look at the cities. You'll see the residential mix. You'll see the commercial. The business, the retail. That's what communities are going to. So the bill would look to streamline
But now, being
that.
narrow as we are here, what effect does that have on the center of the universe? This mega
Well, I
bill?
think it. Really, what Milford's going through on Main Street is a microcosm of that problem. There's the downtown revitalization. We're trying to get businesses back to Milford. We're trying to get retail back. But if you look at the principle, and this is something that I talked about as a member of the Board of Selectmen, unless you get people to live on Main Street or the area, you're not going to have that built-in clientele for the businesses. So when you look to see what they're doing in Cambridge, in South Boston, in the Seaport, all throughout these cities, is they're combining this residential living along with the commercial and retail usage right at that same spot. And that's what Milford's experiencing on Main Street. And I've seen that, one of the steps that the town is taking, I think, is a positive one in terms of the middle school east. So now you're looking to have an over 55 development on Main Street. That's a step forward. So if, in answer to your question, if a bill like that goes forward, a town like Milford can take advantage of those laws and increase its development on Main Street.
Well, I remember I was in Cambridge Biomed at Brighton.
Yes.
Harvard was buying up all the properties. And after a number of years, I mean, Harvard with their tiny little $30 billion endowment really didn't care if the buildings were being rented. They had their 10, their 20, their 30-year plan. And what we found was everything around us was empty.
Yeah.
And eventually, the local pizza shops, grocery stores, everybody started screaming, saying, "You're choking me."
Right.
Because nobody is around.
Exactly.
Exactly. I've always grown up going Iandoli's or Shaw's, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it was there, it was the Heights.
Yeah.
That was our local store.
Yeah.
But if there weren't people,
right.
So I can see everybody wants Milford downtown to be thriving, and we can, gussy it up and give a little bit of money here, help with parking, but I think the root problem, the root cause is what you're saying. You don't have built-in people.
You need that built-in clientele. That's the smart growth principle that's going forward and governing the development of so many areas. And again, Milford is a microcosm of that. So I think a bill like that would benefit the town greatly.
Now, today's hot topic, obviously, is women's rights.
Yes.
Now, the state worked on a bill on that. Did you not?
Well, there are a few things that we did. We passed a bill preventing any type of discrimination from women who are pregnant, which, believe it or not, had never been done.
Brian, I find it amazing when we talk about some of the things on women's rights, because whether you're an old man or you had daughters, you had wives,
of course,
guaranteed you had a mother.
Yeah.
And it stuns me to sit there and say, wait a minute, you could tolerate somebody discriminating against your own mother, wife, daughter? So some of these things, like pregnant, I think we've, more or less all of us have gone through a pregnancy in our home.
Yeah, unfortunately, there were businesses, I think that women went through that, they were not given the time off, or they were told to choose. So
what does the bill actually do?
Well, it just adds the category of pregnancy to the anti-discrimination statute. So it's in there just as race, sex, age, all of those categories.
But help me understand, because to me, you shouldn't discriminate by race. Yes. If she's pregnant, okay, that seems like a given. But what does the bill actually do for somebody who's pregnant?
Well, reasonable accommodations, depending upon what, the woman might need in terms of time off or workplace.
So she's lifting 50, 60 pounds. For a few months, you have to sit there and say, cut me a break.
I think there's got to be a reasonable accommodation on that, depending upon.
Once she's back, she goes back to her job. But
Sure, yeah. So that was one that got in, that we actually passed and the governor signed into law. Given the status of what's happening federally, a lot of women's advocates were very concerned about the fact that there were very old laws on the books in Massachusetts, making it a crime to have an abortion, adultery, fornication. There were a number of old statutes on the books that have been there. So we completely repealed all of those to bring the laws up to the 21st.
Seriously?
The 21st century.
There were laws on the books.
Oh yeah, yep.
But adultery.
Well,
I mean,
I don't know
you know,
exactly.
you sit there and
I don't
say,
wanna-
okay, Emily, Sharon, I know they have a very dull knife,
Yeah.
and start here and
Yeah.
cutting. Okay, they'll fix that. But
Yeah.
how do you, I guess in today's day and age, you can't.
These are old.
Takes two to tango.
Archaic laws that dealt with. I don't hold me on the adultery, but I know that abortion was one of them, and some
doesn't
other
Roe v.
things as
Wade
well. Well, I think
Speak to that.
well, no, I think the feeling is that if the federal government, the Supreme Court, repeals that or overrules Roe v. Wade, then enforcement goes down to the state level, and it becomes
Oh,
state
okay.
by state. And Massachusetts, having some of these old statutes on the books, not very appropriate, certainly not appropriate for the 21st century and what we've experienced. So the thought was to repeal those, and we did that. And the governor signed that into law.
See, to me, it'd be very simple. How would you want your mother, your wife, your daughter treated? And today's day and age, how would you want your husband, your father, whether it be against women or against men? How do you just want a person treated?
Yeah, sure, and unfortunately, I think what's happening in this country, you see what's coming out of the administration federally is a certain crassness, callousness towards people, and it's not going to happen in Massachusetts. So that's one of the permeating facts for driving that. The other thing that got passed was the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. So now that if any family member has an illness or has to care for a family member who has an illness, they can have paid leave from their job. So it goes beyond the FMLA, where it allows the employee to still retain their job and receive wages.
How pervasive was that? Because we've all, you've run a business, I've been involved in businesses, and every once in a while there's one good worker who's not abusing it, just needs a little extra. And you kind of, close your eyes, open your eye, whatever, and you say, boy, if it was me, I would hope somebody would let me take care of my family. But
yeah, as I understand it, this legislation was again something that had been in prior legislators, and again it took a number of sessions to get it passed. It was promoted by labor groups, certainly women's rights groups, and I don't have any firsthand experience of suffering that abuse. I've certainly heard from clients who have had issues and problems with their employer over the years. So this is a type of bill to prevent that, and sets it up basically like a disability policy, disability insurance. So there's a very small premium, portion of it, very small amount gets deducted from the employee, and the employer contributes to that as well.
I got to admit, I think I have a jaundiced view, because in the high-tech world, I don't care what color you are. I don't care if you're male or female. You bring in the sales. You bring in the research. The color is green. At the end of the day,
Sure.
having a happy staff, having a productive staff, maybe short-term hurts a little, but
Yeah.
long-term,
Yeah,
the profitability is just proven itself.
sure.
But I guess I listen to you, and there's got to be a reason that
Yeah,
you're
I don't-
legislating common sense.
Yeah, I don't think all employers are like that. And that was actually one of the arguments that was used in favor of it, to provide staff, employees, these kinds of benefits, to make them feel comfortable if they ever did have a family situation, a family emergency, and with that stress out of the way, off the table, they will be a more productive workforce.
Yeah, it just seems like common sense. Years ago, we had a mother who wanted to nurse.
Sure.
We didn't have a place, so we made an office. Everybody shrunk a little,
Yeah,
and you just sat there and said, if it was my wife or my daughter, I would hope
of course.
that somebody would make accommodations.
Sure. Sure.
And it's not just for her. You know, it's for everybody around, that if they see the company taking care of one of their own, you just feel better about your company.
Of course, of course.
Another strange
course.
one, heroin addicts. You know, when we grew up, you think about it, it was
Yeah.
sketchy people down in a back alley in Boston.
Right, right.
Today,
Right.
you listen to Amy Leone and Chief Tom,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's our neighbors.
It knows no boundaries, geographical or economical. It's been a huge issue for a number of years, not only in our area, but also across the state, really across the country. So, I mean, that's something that I've worked on continuously, really, as a member of the Board of Selectmen. When the police chief first came to us and said that he wanted to start a program with community impact to get counselors to be right with the police department, so that when there's the overdose victim, whether it's at the scene or even at the hospital, they can provide all-around comprehensive services to that individual, whether that means they want to have treatment, detox, counseling, medication, whatever it is. So Milford, I think, really has been out on the forefront of this program in terms of coping with this issue. So I was glad to support that as a member of the Board of Selectmen. In both years as a legislature, I was able to secure, I think, substantial sums of money for this particular program, that the Regional Navigation
But that
Substance
hits
Network.
Milford families direct.
It does. It does. So I was able to get grants, earmarks of $50,000 each year. It allows community impact to work with the police department to hire these additional counselors. It's allowed community impact to expand into other communities. They've gone off into Hopedale. I want to say, they believe Bellingham and Upton. I'm not sure of all of the towns, but I know that they've expanded regionally, and they're looking to expand even more. So that's been something that, you know, I've been very supportive of. I worked very, very closely with Amy. We also brought in a couple of informational sessions for our kids. We recruited Sheriff Evangelitis with his program for Milford High School students, which I thought was very effective. I had seen the Evan Foundation at the State House, and I contacted Amy. It's a very powerful program.
What's an Evan Foundation?
The Evan Foundation is a family from Easton, Massachusetts, Easton, who lost their son Evan to a heroin overdose, I believe at age 17. And the mother and father go to schools. They have a state trooper with them, a state police officer familiar in the drugs that are going around and the overdose situation. They also have a recovered addict to come, and they make a presentation, and they bring it down. They'll make a presentation to any group you'd like. When I talked to Amy about it and the school department, they thought it'd be most effective at the young age. We had it done at Stacy School.
Oh, wow.
And it was a excellent program. These are young kids. That's the age where you really need to get them the education about drug use, about addiction, about pills, these kinds of things, because things happen early. So we were able to put on both of those programs, presentations, as part of the effort to really try to educate and reduce this opioid epidemic. So that's something that I've been working very closely on and very hands-on.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, because you think about it. I mean, your family was at risk because you had athletes.
Sure.
You know,
My son went through it. He had 2 major knee surgeries. This was in 2010, before we even really kind of knew about the fact that these opioids are so addictive. So he had the oxycodone, the Dilaudid, the Percocet, and my wife was unbelievable in that she monitored every pill. She still has the log, because it was there. The craving was there. He wanted the pills. He wanted the pills.
Well, I mean,
he wanted the pills.
Jack is a high school kid.
Yes.
Immortal, invincible. I mean, don't they all feel that way?
Yeah, and
So-
and the doctors were just feeding the pain pills. I don't believe in pills. I never have. So that was a real issue, and that's how a lot of these addictions start. I believe that's how that young Evan got addicted. He got injured, he was an athlete, and he got addicted to the pain pills. It led to the heroin, it led to the fentanyl.
They don't even know. I mean, you think about, as a high school kid, you know, when I hear the story that, okay, Oxy sells on the street for $1 a mig, so it's $80 a tablet 3 times a day. Where are these kids going to get $200 a day? Right? It just...
They turn to the heroin.
They turn to the heroin at $15 a shot.
And then what's out there, I mean, this is not something that's consumer tested or FDA regulated, so it gets mixed by, you know, so-and-so, and they add the fentanyl to it, and that's a killer. You know, our district attorney, Joe Early, who's also been very, very effective on this regard, he brought Sam Quinones to Milford. Sam wrote the book Dreamland, and if you haven't read that, you do it, because Dreamland really brings the intersection of the drug cartel, the doctor-prescribed opiates, and the addiction, and the pharmaceutical businesses' profit incentive all together, and really shows how we got to where we are today. It's a very powerful book.
When young Joe Kennedy came on, and he said that he had hurt himself, he was given some pain pills, and he told the doctor, that's about 3 times more than I'll need. He said he had a fight with the doctor because the doctor kept saying, no, take them, take them.
Yeah, and I think that's changed. You know, I think that's changed, you know, with the bills that have come out of the legislature and even the medical profession, you know, they're realizing that those pills need to be limited. You know, you don't need 30 oxys when, you know, 5 or 6 might do. So that's been a change in the medical profession, which is well needed. It's a step in the right direction. The distribution and the use of Narcan, fortunately to prevent deaths, that's been used even more. So we're making progress, but it's still a huge problem, and there's still a lot to do.
People just don't understand. From being a chemist, heroin or opioids in general are fantastic respiratory inhibitors. Their job is to stop the respiratory system. And they do a great job. And the more you take, the more effective they are at stopping you from breathing.
Yeah, it's awful.
You know, my God, when you think about it, if somebody said, let's go take some respiratory inhibitors, say what? But they don't think about it.
Yeah. So we've tried to, I've tried to be a part of certainly the prevention and education efforts by the programs and the seminars that I've helped put on here in the district. I've tried to be part of the relief efforts by working with the police department and community impact and getting them funding. And you know, that's something that I would look to continue to do because this problem, we seem to be making some headway on it, but there's still a long, long way to go.
Now, year 3 would be a lot easier than you starting what you did in year 1 to bring in funds. And let's be very, very parochial, if you want to call it, Milford.
Okay. Yeah.
Talk to me about some of the money you've brought into Milford, because I hear $1 billion surplus, but then I hear the governor's still vetoing funds coming to Milford.
Yeah, it's a difficult play, but and you know, you try to focus on some of the immediate needs of your district. Certainly, there were some needs in Hopedale and Mendon, which, you know, we tried to address, and I think we did a pretty good job with that. Milford,
but those are different, though. I mean, when I think of Milford,
yeah,
you know, God bless, we've been fortunate that it's like 13 years in a row of a surplus. Not a huge surplus, but when I think of some of these towns around us, if they don't get, it's like Amy.
Sure.
If you hadn't come up with $100 grand, the royal you, the legislature,
right,
and we needed it, we would have come up with it out of our own pockets.
Right.
But some of these towns around us,
right. Well, Mendon, as you know, is really, you know, it's a tight financial situation that they have over there, and they needed funds to start a new police station. So I was able to secure $50,000, which they've used. and are using to go forward to design and build a new police station, which is hugely needed in that community. This most recent year, they're looking to expand their senior center. They had no resources locally to try to do that. Again, I was able to secure $50,000, which they're so appreciative of in terms of going forward to try to expand their senior center. Senator Fatman was very helpful on both of those, which was great. In Milford, the Pheno Field pool is a huge issue. It's something that really needs to be addressed, so I was able to secure $50,000 from the state to go forward on that project. Senator Fatman put in on his end an earmark of $150,000 for the downtown revitalization, which the town's got a committee in place, and they're looking forward, I think, to setting up some guidelines to try to use those funds to try to help some of the business owners on Main Street. Obviously I supported that. So there are a number of things that we've tried to do for the communities locally to bring some earmark funds
something
in.
like Pheno's a perfect case. We just had the discussion at the FinCom because we need $60,000 to do the study. Because we certainly don't want to go ahead with it's going to be $4 to $5 million to save Pheno Field Pool. And before we spend that kind of money, you'd want a study.
Sure.
And we told the Parks Department, because they mentioned that we're probably going to get money from the state.
Yes.
And we said, that's nice, but if that money comes in, it'll go to the general fund. Let's not mix the fact we need the $60,000 study with the fact, great, if I can get 50 grand, not I, but if we can get 50 grand, that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
But
Right.
Again, it's nice to be in lockstep that maybe it only cost us 10 grand to understand what our options are.
Well, it will. And again, from my municipal experience, when I wrote that earmark request, I made it flexible enough so that the community could use that for either soft or hard costs. So if you wanted to use it for feasibility studies or engineering or whatever, you could. If you wanted to use it for some testing or construction work, you could. It's really up to the community to do that. So now I've been talking to the town administrator and also the parks director to, the next step is to try to secure that money as fast as you can, because it's just in the fiscal year, so you really have to use it in that fiscal year. So, we're working to try to make sure that we can secure those funds.
So what else that you're hoping to come our way?
The things that I've tried to do, really not so much in Milford, because I think I have a sense as to what's going on in Milford, but certainly in Mendon, Hopedale, and working with Representative Jeff Roy, who also has Medway, and Senator Spilka.
Yeah, I've got a problem with that. I want to trade some street in Milford. So we get 2 reps, 2 senators. There's got to be a street that not many people live on that we can trade.
Right,
so we get double the...
And grab another added rep.
Grab another, because
Yeah.
I think it was John who told me once, you can't represent one precinct in Medway.
No.
You're representing the whole town.
You are. So they're earmarked projects. We signed on to that, both of us. And Medway, did well with some projects. But it's really a question, I think, of making sure that you stay abreast with your selectmen, with your school committee, to see, what needs are there in the community. And then that kind of gives you the feedback and the impetus to go forward and request what's needed in the town.
Now, it's sticking in my mind when you say 700 requests from constituents that you've had to address.
Yeah.
Now, normally it's 220 days a year. I know that as a legislator, you probably don't get Saturday and Sunday off.
No. But many of those emails were, in fact, responded to on Saturday or Sunday.
So, but that still averages 1 request a day. You have a massive staff to do this?
I have one young lady, 23-year-old young lady who graduated from Brandeis, who serves as my legislative aide, and she's very, very helpful. I think one of the advantages I have is that, I have the law office in Milford. So, to be honest with you, and I have one legal assistant there, secretary, and, a lot of the work got done, through my office as well. In Milford. So and a lot of that probably didn't even get recorded. The 750 was pretty
The
much.
documented ones.
Yeah, we have a software program, so every time we responded to a request or addressed a need or something, my aide in Boston would plug it into the software, and that's what gave us that number. Well, I didn't really do that all the time in Milford, so I mean, I was helping folks around. So it was at least 750. Now, not all of those were complicated. Some of them were very simple. Some of them wanted questions on a particular
But Brian,
bill.
it may not be complicated for you, but if my mother wants
Yeah.
to know how to go to the registry or do something,
Yeah.
what you can solve in 2 minutes could make an hour, 2 hours, half a day go away. So I don't want to take exception, but how did they say that unemployment is not a problem unless you're being laid off?
Yeah, and unemployment, was an issue. In fact, I was out knocking on doors on Sunday, and I had gone up one side of the street, and I left a hand card in a particular door, and I was coming down the other side, and I was coming down. A fella came running out the door and said, "I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to answer the door, but I wanted to come out and thank you. You helped me so much when to get my unemployment." He had just gotten laid off from the glass factory in Milford. And I remembered, it came back to me that he contacted me. For some reason, there was a holdup with unemployment. We were able to locate the proper individual, cut through whatever issue it was, and restored his benefits. So he came out to thank me for that. So, and obviously at that time I, didn't remember it, but then once he started talking to me, it came back to me. So unemployment was a big issue. There were a lot of those kinds of requests in that 750. Things with the registry of motor vehicles.
Oh, God bless.
I jumped in and I represented a disabled constituent before the motor vehicle bonds and appeals to get a driver's license. He hadn't gotten one. I helped people out who had small claims cases against them being sued. I helped out people who were being evicted. So being an attorney was helpful to me in the sense that I knew how to navigate some of those things as well. But again, like I said before, when I ran for this, I said I understand that the primary job is constituent service. It's great to be having your name on a major bill, and you're changing the world and all of that. But the bottom line is you're here to help people, and you're here to help the people in your district. And it is very confusing oftentimes trying to deal with the state agencies. So anything that I can do to simplify that, alleviate that, and help the person move forward is my prime job.
Now, as you move forward and you get another term or another term, do you get more aides? I mean,
well, yeah, I would think you do. Yes, yeah.
it sounds like you're taking on more and more.
Yeah, you're right. If you become a vice chair on a committee, for example, or if you get a leadership position, then yes, you would have more office help. But starting out as a freshman legislator, you just get the one legislative aide
And a bullpen.
Oh, the bullpen, yes, that was quite an event.
So someday you'll get your own office?
No, I have a cubicle, which is fine. We share our desk. My aide and I share our desk. That's the other thing. Everything that you get, you either have to find in the hall or you have to buy yourself. It's not like, the town and you're given this, you're given that. The citations that we give out, that's all, we have to buy those individually.
Wait a minute, say what?
The citations that we hand out to...
Those aren't provided to you?
No, we have to purchase the covers. I go to Staples, I buy the gold seals. My wife went to Joann Fabric and bought the blue ribbon. So
I would have never thought.
Yeah, so that's all on you. Do you know what I mean? You as a representative have to pay for that for people. That's fine. It's all part of the job and part of what you do.
Yeah, but none of us in industry, when I have to send a letter to somebody, the company gives me the envelope, gives me the letterhead.
Well, they give us letterheads. We do have letterheads, so we do get paper.
But even the citation,
they give you the citation itself, but the actual cover and the dressing is stuff that
So you would have to hand somebody a piece of paper and say, here,
Yeah.
you're kind of important, but not enough to have a real binder.
Yeah. So to get the cover and the seal and all of that, you need to do it. And the furniture. I mean, I've got a bookshelf, and you'll remember this. I've got a bookshelf that I grabbed out of the hallway that I'm using, and it's so old. On the back of it, it says Representative Kavarian.
Oh,
Now, George Kavarian was Speaker of the House, I think, in the 80s.
I was
So
gonna say, 30
God
years
knows when
ago?
he was a representative, and this apparently was his bookcase, But you make do with what you have, and it's been fine. And obviously I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. There's some remarkable people that are working on behalf of the Commonwealth, and just to have happen what happened to me on Sunday, to have someone come forward and actually thank me that I had helped them out, to secure unemployment benefits at a very stressful time in that person's life is tremendously gratifying.
We're getting near the end. Before I ask my final question, what do you think the biggest challenges would be next term?
I think some of the things on the horizon, as I'm looking at, I think these ballot questions could present an issue. The nurse staffing is going to be a huge issue. I think if that does pass, I would envision legislative work on that, similar to the marijuana question that I got hit between the eyes on as soon as we got in there, because these ballot questions really don't address things in a practical, real way. So I mean, I'm not sure. I'm just kind of seeing that as an issue. Housing is going to be a big issue going forward. The renewable energy, we made some good strides on that, but there's a lot more work to be done on that. There's a lot left on the table that needs to be handled.
So as we come to an end, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, I would say that if you look back 2 years ago and see what I said that I was going to do, I've done that, and I think I've done more than that, and I think I've done it fairly well. So if you're from Milford and you feel that a state representative who's going to be knowledgeable, dedicated, experienced, and attentive to your needs, if you think that that's the kind of state representative that you want to have, then I would suggest that you ought to vote for me, because that's the state representative that I'll be. And to be honest with you, with a term experience under my belt, I think I can do even more next term.
Thank you. As always, I'll never ask you to vote for any specific candidate, but I'll beg you to get to know the candidates so you have an informed opinion, and I'll absolutely beg you to get out and vote. These positions are so critical to the future of Milford. You've heard about the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that goes on. We've been blessed and fortunate to have people who really cared about Milford representing us, and let's keep it that way. So as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, Al. Pleasure to be here.
Not too long since I've been home.